the areas that you feel like things are off in your relationships, a lot of times those are mirroring something that's off with like your relationship with yourself.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like should we say our names again a few times? I feel like we should get in the habit of that. I'm Sarah.
I'm Emily.
And you're Emily. Yeah. Because now we've got all these lovely podcasts where people can see our faces. And so I don't know. I feel like it's so funny putting out content into the world because it's just like, I don't know, you forget to do the things where you're like, this is who I am. This is who she is.
I'm like, everybody knows us. Everyone knows us.
But also for me, it's more like nobody listens to this.
Like, nobody needs to know our name. They don't care.
Yeah, it's like, who cares, right? And then when people are like, oh my gosh, I listen to your podcast, which actually happens a lot. I'm like, oh, so pleasantly surprised. And that doesn't really go away, I don't think. Yeah.
Is it weird? Because I feel like I've talked to people who have heard the podcast and then I'm like just kind of meeting them for the first time. And I feel like I'm like, you know so much more about how my brain works than I know about yours.
Yes.
Like it feels like off balance and I'm like wanting to, know what's going on in their brain too. But it's a weird feeling.
It's a super weird feeling. I think I've talked about this before because I've been having it for a few years now with like Write Your Way to Freedom and stuff like that. And people will also say things like, oh, your hair's gotten long. And I'm like, oh, I don't know you.
Oh, wow.
I was just like, oh, has it? Since the last time we didn't speak? I don't know. It's just like the whole thing, weird. The whole concept is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Of people like knowing you or knowing about
There's
you.
Nothing.
And you not knowing them. Yeah.
And it's actually in some ways really kind of sweet because you start off on like I just remind myself that we're starting off on like a different foot because they like feel like they know me. And so what's happened actually is people feel like they can be real vulnerable.
You can probably get to a certain place a lot quicker.
Yes.
Yeah, in a connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's actually something I really love because they're like, I don't know, I've had people say to me, this would feel like TMI, but I feel like with you it's not going to be. So like blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, I love that. Yeah. It's great.
I love that so much.
Yeah, you just get right to it.
Yeah, that's kind of like this whole idea that we've been talking about, the beliefs that keep us small. And I don't know, I think it would be cool to unpack that in context of the relationships we have with other people.
Yes. This is a good one.
Into everything. Yeah. With this like.
So we've done 3 parts now. Yeah. So the first one was money. Second one was like kind of stuff that we feel like has kept us small as women, right? Or stereotypically. And then now this is going to be relationships, which I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've learned a lot about this particular topic from our relationship. I feel like our relationship, it was the first relationship that I've had that had really had the capacity maybe to like flex as we grew, with each other in our lives. And it didn't like there's a lot of relationships that I think exist in a bubble, and this is where it is. It's not really about witnessing the other person and become their like most actualized self, but like our relationship has been able to space for that in a beautiful way. And I remember when we first were like getting to know each other, we were already like, oh my God, like you're my best friend, and felt so like connected and like kindred energy. I do remember you saying something along the lines of how like I didn't allow myself to just be messy in our relationship. And we like talked about that, and that was like, it was like a topic that we talked about, and I remember just being like, yeah, like I don't feel like and at the time I didn't feel like I allowed myself to be messy in any relationship except maybe with my partner, and and it helped me really uncover these, like, all of these limiting beliefs that I had, that was like, you will be a burden. Like if you're messy in a
Mm,
relationship and you're not holding the space where you're really like lifting people up and encouraging them and leaving them feeling better than they did when, you first connected, that
mhm,
you're a burden, that you're going to drag people down with like your sadness or your heaviness. And then there were also these beliefs of like, maybe beliefs that were like, if you're messy, then you're not going to be loved. Like these
mhm,
beliefs around like having to show up in a certain way in order to be worthy of love, and all those
mhm,
like were kind of getting
mhm.
kicked up in my relationship with you. And I remember like you were like, you were kind of pointing out like, how do you, when I'm messy with you, how do you feel like that's too much and too heavy, and you don't love me because like, and I'm like, no, of course not, I'd like love you even
Mhm.
more. And you're like, you're like, that's what you're like blocking for our
Not giving
relationship
that
from
to me.
experiencing, that is like me getting to hold space for you and show you how much I love you by witnessing you in your mess and still loving you. And I remember that was like I just had never had anybody like stay in that with me to like,
Mhm.
welcome me into that expression. And since then I've been plenty messy.
You were like, "Okay, blah." No, I'm just kidding.
Bleh.
No, it was like the thing that was surprising to me is because you hold space so well for others that it actually, because that was like that conversation where I was like, "Hey, you're not really doing the same thing." Because I want to say one thing. Actually, I want to back up for a second because something that was going through my mind during this whole time, because that conversation didn't happen until like probably a year or more into our friendship. Like it wasn't like
Right.
something that happened early on, right? And part of it
Mhm.
was because I really do think it is my responsibility to create a safe place for people to be vulnerable, right?
Mm.
And so I don't demand or expect that people in my life are vulnerable with me. And I think this also has to be with like just kind of how I perceive or I prefer things to be. Like for example, if I have a friend who's like going through something hard, or like I know something hard is coming, like maybe they're about to have a baby, for example. I always make sure to tell people because I know this about myself. I'm like, I just want you to know that it would be like my fucking greatest honor and pleasure and like delight to be there for you while you have a baby. But I want you to know that I'm not probably going to like be reaching out a lot because I really also am allergic to being overbearing. That's like a
Sure.
pitch I've made to people many times. Um, and I'm like, so just know that like I would love it, but like you're probably gonna have to reach out. So this is something that I didn't say this to you in our friendship until like at least a year in. I don't even know if it was more because I
Mhm.
I kept kind of like waiting for it. And you were so good at holding space for me that I actually for a long time I was like, okay, I'm not that person for her. Like I literally was like telling
Mhm.
myself this. I was like maybe that's somebody else in her life, but I feel really like kind of like this is getting one-sided because you were holding such wonderful space for me in my net messiness, but you were like keeping it like quite buttoned up with me, which is actually like kind of funny to think back on now.
Right,
That
it
our
is.
friendship had that phase or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
um so it took me a long time to get to a place where I was like, I feel like I need to say this because I don't see her like opening up, and I also don't, I feel like I've done as much as I can, and maybe I just need to ask her like what I need to do to like to give her the gift that you like so freely give me, really. So it was like a whole thing. I remember it really well. Cuz I was like gonna say the thing to you and I was like nervous cuz there was a part of me that was afraid that maybe you didn't feel like I had the capacity to like hold space for you,
Mm.
or maybe
Mhm.
I wasn't like that person for you. And I was like, it was interesting cuz it was like a thing that I came to you to say, but it was also like quite vulnerable for me because there I
Yeah.
felt like there was a chance that you would be like, okay, yeah, sure. But then like
Right.
not. not be vulnerable. I don't, and I'm sure you didn't know any of that. Did you?
No, but I feel like, I mean, I feel like that makes sense. I don't think I've ever heard you explicitly state that, but I feel like that makes a lot of sense. You
Mhm.
were essentially inviting me to be vulnerable with you, which in itself is very vulnerable, and that, yeah, I feel
Right.
like that probably did feel a little like, and it's so funny because it it was so much a block within me that was just this like
Mhm.
very, right, like this very like undeserving, I don't get
Mhm.
to take up space, like my role is I hold space for people, I support other people, like that's what I do. And it was just, yeah, I was very lopsided and one-sided in my own like mind. It was really, and it really limited me in my relationships at large, I think. And
Mhm.
because like, and the funny thing is like I would be vulnerable, quote unquote, by like maybe sharing really deep things or stuff like that, but the vulnerability that we're talking here is like me showing you myself when I'm much less than my best. It was like that vulnerable. It's like
Yes.
messy.
Yeah.
It was I'm not saying the right things. I'm not thinking the right way. I'm not all polished up. I'm just like a
Yeah.
fucking train wreck. And honestly, not like a ton of people have seen that part of me really, like, or I've let that, like, I've felt like I can be that, and
Well, it's
but
really scary because it's the time where
yeah,
you like your thoughts are unformed and I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you now the number of times where we call each other and we're like, I need help sorting out my brain. And then, like,
yeah.
what comes out of our mouth next is like not a fully formed thought or not like, it's like
I
not
know.
eloquent. And it's maybe sometimes kind of fucked up where you're like, okay, so I think I hate this person, which like that's never, I don't even think that's ever happened. But like, you know what I mean? Where it's just like you're having big feelings and you're like, I'm not going to stay here, but I am going to go here with my mind a little
Like, in
bit.
having a
like,
space where it's safe to do that, like, I feel like I just recently did that to you. I like called you and I was just in full freak out. And I didn't like, I was saying
mhm.
so much crazy shit. There was like so much crazy crap going out of my mouth. And you were just like, okay, are you driving? Like, can you pull over? Like, can you? And you're like,
The
things
thing
are
is
feeling
also
really
like
big right now.
I was like, because that was, I think, for me, something that you've modeled, like for me, is because when you're in freak out mode, the desire to solve problems is like massive. You're like, okay, now
Yeah.
I have to make all these decisions in this state of panic. And you have always helped me by being like, you don't need to make a decision right now. Like, this is
Hmm.
not the time to make a decision. This is just the time to calm down, sit with your feelings, share your
Yes.
crazy ass thoughts with me. Um, and so
Hmm.
that, but because that's the thing, is you're like, because you were in decision, you're like, okay, this is the next move. This, and I
This
was
is
like,
this.
how about we
Yeah.
just pull over?
Yeah. And I was making like a bunch of definitive statements. That's another thing. Like, so you, when you're
Yes.
freaking out, you want to make decisions to save yourself from the pain so you don't ever have to experience that pain again.
Mm-hmm.
And you make definitive thoughts. You try to be like, this
Right.
situation is
Mm-hmm.
this person is this, because you're trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. And I remember I was
Mm-hmm.
making all these definitive statements and you were like, it makes sense that you're feeling that way right now. And I'm just like, and I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
that, and I was just like, yes, because it's so true. Because you were like, even in that moment, reminding me this is a temporary like freak out feeling, and I'm not always going to be in this space. But it's like having, being able to like be in relationship with someone and be able to hold space for them when they're freaking out that way is like, it's such a valuable gift. And honestly, it's like, and I feel like we've practiced this too, is like the person who's holding space to not go into problem solving decision making mode either, because like I know I've
It's
experienced
not
that where
helpful.
I'm like let's figure this out, like, and you're just in the same freak out energy. And we've like learned how to do this so
Mhm.
well of like staying in this like grounded, calm, neutral, like and we both do the thing where like, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry, I'm so sorry. We like start having like those moments of self-awareness where you're just like, I know I'm being fucking crazy. And then we both do the thing of like, I'm here, it's okay, I see you. And it's
Yeah.
just so good.
Yes. Listen, when I realize that when somebody in my life that I love is having a freak out, that step one is to make them feel seen and heard. And then,
Hmm.
and then, and maybe not even in that same conversation, but only then can you move into like problem solving mode in an actual meaningful way because you got to get out of
Right,
that freak out first. That's like been
right.
such a game changer. In fact, the code word for me and Ben now is you're skipping steps. So, because
Mm,
like, if the conflict is between us and one of us is like having a little bit of like we're triggered or whatever, and the other person jumps into problem solving mode, we'll just be like, you're skipping steps because I'm not like calm and ready to like
not
make decisions.
not there, yeah.
And it's like, it's just been so helpful because I don't know, I have like a vivid memory of me like full blown freaking out, being like, I'm never gonna be in a relationship again. I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna move in with you and I'm gonna like be like by myself forever and I'm just gonna get a bunch of cats. And I remember it so well, and you being like, "Mm-hmm, yeah," but not trying to be like, "Oh, that's
Change your
ridiculous.
mind,
That's silly.
yeah.
You're obviously gonna end up in a relationship because that's like not the place." You just like let me be like, "Yeah, like
That's like
maybe
what
you'll be a cat lady. I'll
and
be
that
a
feels
cat lady
really
with
good right
you."
now. Yeah.
Like,
That's the thing, is like, it's so true, and even though I could see, like, there was, like, part of me where I'm like, I like, it's like, I know in your pain right now, you're seeing really narrow, and I hope you can trust me that I see a
mm-hmm.
bigger vision than you're able to see right now of yourself. And it's like so okay to fucking just like let yourself think about being a cat lady for a minute. Like, let's like let yourself
Yeah.
do that, you know?
Oh
Like,
man,
that's
I just yeah,
cathartic.
that was one that like stood out to me. I was like, I think we were like at a furniture store. Remember I like didn't want to be alone and I came and was with you while you were like looking for couches and I
Oh,
just would
I
like
do. I
sometimes sit
remember
on the
that.
couches that you were like shopping. You were shopping for and I would just be crying and I was like,
I know.
I'm never getting married. I'm never having children.
I know.
I'm gonna be alone. And you were just like, this is okay. And I was like, this couch is nice. Like it was such a
I remember
disaster.
that day. It was so funny. We were in West Elm. I remember my kids were there and they were like, Lila, she must have been
Yes.
little. Like maybe she was 3. And I remember she was like,
Yes.
can I need to go give her a hug. And I was like, I think that's a really good idea.
Yes.
And she like my girls went and like
Because I was
climbed on
like,
top of you.
because I just like
Oh,
didn't want to be alone. So you were like, we're going to look for a couch. And I was like, I can do that. But I was just like periods of just like bawling my face off.
yeah,
And Evie was just like being so good to me. I'll
I
never forget. She was
know.
like, it's okay. She was like, hold my hand sometimes. And I was like,
That's so
was this
sweet.
the couch we're picking out that I can sleep on for the rest of my life? Because this is
In
where
my
it's
living
going.
room. Oh my gosh. I think that's the thing, is like not diminishing the pain by, even if what you're saying
No.
is true, even if like, even if I could have looked at you and been like, stop your belly aching, someday you're gonna be married to like this gorgeous man and living in California. Like it's like not diminishing the pain, that the very real pain that you were experiencing right there, and having the
No.
willingness to sit in that pain with you. Like I think that's like really what
That was
makes
like,
relationships like so meaningful, you know?
mhm. That
Yeah,
like
like
trip to West Elm where I just like boo-hooed and ugly cried on different couches is like forever going to be one of my like fondest memories of our friendship.
oh, I know. I remember that. And I remember
Because
being
I
like,
was just like such a mess.
yeah, that was a day. That was a day. I was actually just talking
Anytime
with
I see somebody having like a meltdown in public, sorry, anytime I see
no,
somebody having a meltdown in public, because I used to get like kind of judgy about it, now I'm like, oh,
I
that's a
see you.
thing. Like,
I see you,
I feel
girl.
for that person. I know
Yeah,
something's going
totally.
on.
Oh.
What were you
And
gonna
so my I was
say?
well, I was
Or
just
you're
actually just
just
talking to a good friend, and she was going through this like really extraordinarily painful time, and it was like her version of
mhm.
West Elm, but I had her in my kitchen, and I had laid out like vitamins and like because she was like having a hard time eating, I laid out vitamins and water and little snacks like a little bird, and I was like here, and I was just like getting her to eat and drink. And the thing is like getting to like
Mm.
care and nurture for like people I love and care about when they're in pain, and like the feeling of being trusted with their mess like goes back to the beginning. And it's such like a profound honor, honestly. Like it's like an honor to be able to
Mhm.
like sit in that space with somebody in that raw, cracked open, like vulnerable place, and to get to like love on you, to get to love on her or whoever it is, my own kids, like it that
Mhm.
that feeling right there, like I mean that's like love manifest, you know. And I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
fears and a lot of beliefs that we have in our relationships, beliefs about ourselves and what we deserve, and that keeps us, I think, from experiencing the depths of those things. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of it is the fear of being seen, because what if somebody really sees me and really sees my mess and they don't
Mhm.
love me, right? And so it would be
Mhm.
better to not risk
Yeah.
that at all.
But we
And, you know,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
but I will say I feel like and most of us know the feeling of like seeing that in somebody else and just like loving them so much more for it.
Yes.
For me, the bigger practice actually was working on sitting with people like that were experiencing pain or discomfort and not really and not knowing well initially like when I was younger I didn't know what to do. Like that's
Mm,
just like not what was modeled. Like growing up, I feel like this is how most people I feel like this was like when somebody's having a big emotional like experience, most people are like ignore it or are like you're fine or anything like that.
mm,
I actually remember I remember a pretty like pivotal moment where I was at dinner with my a previous partner's family and they were kind of like this was a thing that they did where they would ignore people when they were in pain because I think it was uncomfortable for them and there was nobody knew what to do. I remember being like out to dinner at a restaurant and it had recently been someone's funeral who had died from like drinking and one of the like siblings was sharing a story about an interaction with that person and how I think she didn't really like I think she was feeling like sadness that they were gone and there wasn't a resolution when they had reached out for a resolution and she had been
mm.
hurt by them and kind of was like no thank you and she was like talking about it and it was creating and then she started crying and as she started crying at the dinner table everyone like turned towards their food and like
Oh,
nobody was
wow.
everybody kind of stopped acknowledging her and then changed the subject and I was like mm. And I started to do it
Wow.
too because I was like well that's what everyone's doing and I'm not the like I'm like a person's partner here and then I had a whole moment where I was like no I'm not this is not okay and I asked her I was like do you want to go outside for a second
Mm.
because obviously it wasn't like we were going to do something at the table like that was clearly making everyone uncomfortable and she was like yeah and we went outside and she had a big old cry in front of the restaurant and it was like the saddest like
Yeah.
most I mean it was just like she was like realizing she couldn't have resolution with this person
Right.
and it was a moment for me where I was like I'm just gonna do the thing even when it's uncomfortable. Because it
Yeah.
felt so much more right to be standing in front of this restaurant with her while she like cried a little bit. And then like us having a moment where we kind of came back and like thought about that person and then like rejoined for dinner. But it was a point in time where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore this way. Because that's actually what kind of not as much. I don't think my family would have done it to that extent, but it still isn't uncommon, I think for somebody to experience a lot of pain and like a socially like weird situation like out in public at dinner. Um and it just, I don't know, for me it was like a turning point where I was like,
Mm.
I'm not doing it this way where we just like ignore people when they're in pain.
Dismiss the
But
pain.
I will
Wow.
say it was so uncomfortable for me to like ask her if she wanted to go out. Like it didn't come easy. I was like,
Mm.
because it just felt like I was like going against what was happening at the table in
Right,
some weird
right.
way. I was also young. I was like in my early 20s. But also I think that, I don't know. I guess I want to say that it was not normal or natural for me to do that. And that it's been a practice and a decision that when somebody is experiencing big pain, I'm going to, one, not try to like solve it for them, but I'm just going to try and like hold space for them and then do what I need to do internally to be okay myself and to not
Mm.
like take it on, but to still feel like empathy for them. And that's been like a fucking practice.
Yes,
And the
yes.
good thing is that comes out the other side is other people getting real emotional used to make me so uncomfortable. Whereas now it
Mm.
doesn't really make me uncomfortable. And the practice also resulted in me not taking on people's emotions as my own as much.
Mm. That's
So I don't know.
huge.
That was a lot of different thoughts. But I remember because for me it was like a decision. Like it I can like trace it back where I was like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
There's
that was a
like
lot.
that's such a good point though of like because there when you're witnessing somebody in pain, there is like a certain sense of self that you need to have to not get lost in their pain, to not shut their
Mhm.
pain down, and also not to get lost in their pain. And I think
Yes.
people can lean too far one way or the other. And because like I really
Mhm.
identify with that, getting like lost in people's pain. Like I like I remember different awful things that have happened or people have shared things with me, and it just like crushed me, you know,
Mhm.
it like overwhelmed me, and I like took it on, and that's not
Mhm.
helpful either, you know what I mean? Because like the
No.
last thing somebody who's in pain wants to feel is like they're hurting somebody else by sharing their pain, which is just like a inherent fear
Right.
I think we all have.
Well, it's
Like,
the
oh
too
my god.
much belief.
Yeah, my
Mhm.
pain is too much. I'm hurting this person by sharing this pain with them. And but it is a
Mhm.
practice to learn how to sit in pain with somebody, in empathy with like an openness, and know what is yours and what isn't yours. You know what I mean? And to
Right.
know how to have those
Mhm.
kind of like those it's just like kind of like a grounding in yourself that you have. But absolutely, yes, it absolutely is a practice 100%. I mean that it's even something like, I mean, God, like when you have kids, like it's like a constant practice to be able to sit with them in their freak out. And honestly, isn't that all we want is to like freak out and have somebody standing there looking at us just being like, it's okay, baby. Like, I love you, you're
Yeah.
hurting. Like that's all we want, you know, is
It's so
to
true.
not feel like we're too much, to not feel like our pain is too much, to not feel like we're too messy to be loved, but to just like be seen in our mess and have somebody just be like, I love you so much. Like
Listen, it's
that's what
so
we
true.
want.
We both, and that's, and we, you and I both, we both have things in our life that have happened where it's created where I've noticed a lot of discomfort. For me, it's like my struggles with addiction and how uncomfortable that makes people. And really I've realized that all I kind of want, or what I would love, is for it to not be like weird. Cuz
Mm,
anytime it's come up or somebody like people are just so like they like tiptoe around like asking questions about it
mm,
or don't ask questions about it. And I would much
mm,
rather just be like cracking jokes about it at this point.
mm,
You
mm-hmm,
know what I mean?
mm.
That's like to me the like next level of healing, and I know you have your own thing where it's
Mm.
like I don't know. At the end of the day, the thing that would feel really good is if we could just like it could be a conversation that doesn't make people like, "Ugh, oh, this is so uncomfortable."
That is such an interesting
It's
feeling.
just you just want it to not be too much.
Yes. Like
Mhm.
that feeling of, cuz like I experienced that feeling in other people after my mom died. is the weird, like, oh,
Right.
like it's like the I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to remind you that your mom's dead. And it's kind of like you're not
It's like,
reminding
oh,
me
I
that she's
remember.
dead. Like I'm pretty well aware of it. And honestly, it would just be nice to have somebody like acknowledge the fact that she is dead and I'm suffering in pain, like right now because of it. But it's weird. Like we have this weird belief system that it's like by me asking about your struggles with addiction or me asking about somebody who died in your life, that I'm suddenly reminding you of some pain that you had forgotten in your life. And it's just not the case, you know? And it's like the
Yeah.
right. And so that's like a weird misconception
When
that
people
like,
ask me questions about it, it's like it's yeah, when people ask me questions about it, it's like a relief. It's like I remember because we were watching a you were here recently and we were watching some comedian and she had a whole like she had a whole 6 minutes on dead mom jokes. And I was like,
yes.
because she was like, my mom died, and I know it makes you uncomfortable because I got 6 more minutes of dead mom jokes, so buckle up. And I was like, I'm sitting here going like, is Emily okay? And you said something to the effect of, gosh, what a relief. Like all I want to do is like laugh at this point about all of this. And she was just like going for it and like joking about how uncomfortable it makes people. And you were cracking up like just like I don't know, just like bringing in humor. Obviously getting to a place where humor like feels good is one
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. But
Mm-hmm.
and what I compare it to in my mind is I'm like, okay, this is how I feel about addiction. Because anytime I
Mm-hmm.
hear a comedian like cracking jokes about how fucked up addiction is, I'm like crying laughing because I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the worst. Like,
Yeah.
but just like so relieved that somebody's like making jokes about it. Because it's like,
Mm.
I just want to like get to the other side of that pain where we can like laugh a little. I mean, there's still pain, right? It doesn't
Right.
like
It doesn't
it's not
erase
about like,
pain.
you know, but it is really I think it just all comes down to that core desire of not wanting to feel like it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're hurting someone else when you're experiencing like a big pain. And so
Mm-hmm.
anytime I don't know, we can get into that place. And honestly, like using my own pain, like when that happened with the comedian, I literally told myself, I was like, oh, it's like me with addiction. So I'm just gonna like laugh at the dead mom
Yeah.
jokes with her. Even
Yeah.
though initially I was like, oh, are we okay here?
I know it was so funny. I felt you like cringing on the couch, and I was just like, "No, this is good. This is
I
really
was
good
like,
for me." Yeah,
I know.
it's
I was
like
like, thank you. I was like, I don't know if we're laughing here or what, but
we're laughing. We're laughing. There is
yeah,
something. There is
we're
something
laughing.
about, and unless you've experienced some sort of like big pain, I guess, like that, it might be hard to understand like why making jokes and laughing about it is so cathartic. But it's like because like we're processing the pain one way or the other. And there's I think only
Right.
so much energy you can like process through like the like anguish, that you need to kind
Mm-hmm.
of your brain needs to balance that out with like fucking like really insensitive fucking sacrilegious
Yeah,
jokes.
vulgar
Laugh about
humor.
it. Yeah, because you have to just
Yeah.
kind of get dark in that way. And it's funny, that's something I've come to learn about comedy. I feel like we've like talked about this a little bit before, but there was like a time in my life, like in my early 20s, I was very sensitive and religious at that point in my life. And I'm just sensitive. But there was like I remember getting like I would just be like offended all the time by comedians making jokes about things that I thought were like very serious, and we don't make jokes about these things, you know.
Right.
But it was like
Right.
it wasn't until like I really experienced the pain of losing my mother and came to learn about how important actually comedy is to processing the human experience. It's kind of
Mhm.
necessary in a lot of ways and incredibly cathartic. So, but anyway, that's like a comedy tangent, but it's like, yeah, it is so true. Like this holding, it's just this whole piece, like holding space for other people in their pain. That's all anybody want. They, if like there's somebody in your life that's experiencing pain, they don't want you to ignore it, to not remind them about it or something like that. They want to feel like they're being seen. Like how are you with all of that?
Mm.
Like I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. I see you. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Like, it was so
Totally.
funny. Like, after my mom died, I didn't really, I feel like I would just talk to whoever would listen to me. I would just talk to them about my dead mom. Like, in the like the person checking out my groceries, like, how are you today? Not doing great. My mom just died. Like, and they're like, oh.
Just like anyone, please. And they're like,
Anyone.
I don't know what to do with this information.
Right. And I was like assaulting people with my tragedy, which wasn't great, but I was like realizing like, wow, I like I needed like an outlet to process this like big feeling, you know? Um
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
It's true. I mean, holding that's really I think a big realization for me in life, like across the board, and then also huge practice and getting more comfortable with it. Because also the thing is the more comfortable you get with like that whole thing in particular, I just feel like the more ease you bring into your life. You know what I mean? Because it's like an
Mm.
emotional like steadiness.
Mm.
Another element of this that I've learned through our relationship though is how I didn't realize fully, and maybe I still don't, but I started to become aware after some conversations with you like years ago, how much I try to manage other people's emotions
Mm.
by qualifying what I say or wording things in a particular way or eliminate or like omitting certain pieces of information even so that like their feelings don't get hurt,
Mm.
or I don't know, it was like this whole like range of behaviors that included like a lot of different things. And you said something to me to the effect of like when you do that, you're communicating, not overtly like in their face, but like you're communicating basically that you don't think that they have the capacity, intelligence, emotional like strength or resiliency to like handle whatever it is that you're trying to like circumnavigate with your like
Mm.
weird ass like mind games.
Right.
And I was just, it was because it was, I needed to hear basically that like I don't know better, right? Because
Mm.
before that I was kind of operating from a place of thinking that I knew better across the board. Um but not knowing that that's what I was doing. I also think that was like
Right.
seriously modeled for me, right?
Mm.
And it was like a way of, it's like telling white lies. Like that's a good example. Like telling white lies. Like the whole concept around white lies is like, oh, you're telling a little lie to protect that person from being in pain. But it's like, I don't know. There's just so many instances I came to realize that I was like micromanaging situations in my relationships unnecessarily, and
Mm.
also communicating like a lack of respect almost. I mean, this isn't what I intended to communicate,
Right.
right? I wasn't like,
Right.
it wasn't like I actually disrespected these people. It wasn't that I actually like, when you said it like that, I wasn't like, oh no, but I do think that they're like not emotionally capable.
Right.
It
Right.
wasn't that at all. It was more just like I was trying to micromanage things, and part of that included like not asking for my like needs to be like met in a
Mm.
relationship.
Yeah.
um and this is just huge because I see it, obviously it's so much easier when you see something like this in yourself to then also see it in other people, and I see it
Mm.
in like so many people's ways. And so I've even, because I can see friends now doing that to me, I try when I recognize it, which I can't always, but when I do recognize it, saying to them things like, hey, I'll let you know if I'm like ever uncomfortable with this thing, so you don't have to keep like checking in on me.
Yeah.
Or um I'll let you know if I ever am like uncomfortable and don't actually like want to meet up and do this thing. And then they're like, okay, I now trust you that you will like speak up for yourself and I don't have to do the like same thing that I was doing. This
Yes.
weird like management of emotional management or something.
Yes.
I feel like that was a little vague. I don't know if I'm trying to think of like stories to give it like legs, but
It's
you know what I
I
mean?
feel like it's something that because like I identify with what you're saying. I because I've done that like my whole life. Like, and it's interesting because it
Yeah.
comes
I
from
think we all do.
we do. And you phrased it as in, as like you felt like you knew better about the situation. And there's something in there, like we make some sort of like conclusion. We come to a conclusion subconsciously about how this person would react if we were fully transparent. We decide that we know better what's best for them, you know, and what they can handle and what they can't handle.
Mhm.
It is like a, maybe it's like rooted, for me, maybe it's rooted in a little bit of like a lack of trust in other people, maybe. I don't know. But it is something, because it's something that I do. I make these subconscious judgments like,
But do you think it's that it's a lack of trust in people?
hmm.
Or is it that you just think it's like for me, because I feel like it was more of like once it was pointed out to me that it appears like a lack of trust in
Hmm.
people, it was easy for me to like notice and change that behavior. Not like
Mm.
100% obviously, but like in general. But for me, I think it was much more rooted in a place of um what I thought was like kindness. Like I just thought I was being kind by
Oh,
like
interesting. By
um
sparing them all the details of your pain or whatever.
yeah, I was like yeah, my pain, but not even that, just like man, I wish I could come up with an example here. I don't know, even with like romantic partners, like asking for what there used to be things where I would just think, oh, we're incompatible in this area, rather than
Mm.
like asking
Working
for a
on it.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. So even okay, so I guess my mind was like in a couple different areas here, because there
Mhm.
was like one part of my mind that was thinking like there's totally conversations that I've had with people, and this is kind of rooted in having conversations with people still very involved in like a religious faith, that I felt
Mhm.
like I couldn't be fully honest with, because I felt like I knew what their belief system was and I knew how they were going to judge me or what they were going to say about the thing that I was saying.
Mhm.
And that's like not what I wanted to hear. Like I didn't want to hear the Bible this, or God, I should pray more here. And so there was definitely like some weird, but that might be getting blurry, and like just I was just experiencing differentiation and having boundaries. But like this, what you're touching on here is more, and this is something that actually like I've learned from you, is the idea of like it's exactly what you said. Like there's been times in relationships where things start getting weird and I would just be like, oh, we grew apart, and I would just like let it go, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And
Mhm.
you kind of, I remember you were telling me about just like friendships that that's what you thought was happening, but then you decided like, hey, like is this something we can talk about? Is this a way that we can shift? Is this a way we can see each other better? And asking for your needs, which is like incredibly vulnerable. And I remember being like, huh, I still don't think
Mhm.
I'm great at that at all. Because like I
Mhm.
don't know, there's like part of me that's just like fucking like detached from reality. I don't know. Where I'm like, oh, if that's where you're going, then
Yeah.
best of luck, you know. But yeah, like and but there is something, okay, sorry, my brain's going a million different directions, because you said rooted in kindness. So do you
Yeah.
feel like it's being not high maintenance and being like really agreeable is like more kind in a relationship, like kind of thing?
Sometimes, sometimes, but I'll actually give you an example because this is the most common one.
Mm.
It was I was very okay growing up for there to be white lies, especially if it was like to protect someone's emotions. For example, I can't make it to your birthday party. I
Mm.
have insert something that's not quite true. Rather than figuring out why you don't actually want to be at that person's birthday party,
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, like a situation, I'm just like, so it would be situations where I would say, like, somebody would, it's basically like not, it's kind of like not being fully honest because you don't think your own real
Reason
needs
is good enough.
are
Yeah.
worthy enough.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's what it is. So it's like I don't know. It would be maybe situations where I knew there would be a lot of drinking, and it was early on in my sobriety, and it wasn't a good space for me to be in. And like an older version of me would be like, yeah, I can't come to your birthday party because uh I don't know, my cousin's in town or something like
Right,
that. And maybe
right,
that's true, maybe that's not true. Sometimes it would be, sometimes it wouldn't be. But it was never like, and the justification is that like, oh, maybe it wasn't a safe place for me, but I didn't feel like I could just like say the truth. And
mm,
I've just gotten to a place in the last like 10 years or so where I say the thing. And so I'll even say that to people recently. I was like, I'm practicing like saying exactly what I'm thinking. And there's a part of me that's like concerned about going because I know that like everybody's just going to be wasted the whole time. And quite frankly,
right,
that doesn't sound like the best time for me because I'm sober. And then there's part of me who's like, I would love to go. And I actually like think drunk people are hilarious. And
right,
I know there's going
right,
to be like other things to do.
right.
And so it's that. It's like when
Mm,
there's situations in which you don't actually want to go, and maybe it's because this friendship isn't a good friendship for you, but you find yourself kind of like circumnavigating situations and coming up with reasons or excuses or um without actually saying like what your needs are, which is maybe
mm,
that you'd prefer to like not meet on 10 p.m. on a Friday night because you kind of want to go to bed early. You know what I mean?
right,
It's like
right.
it was always like the little stuff, the little stuff. Never, because once it was like too big, I felt like I couldn't. I don't know. I couldn't be managed with like
It wasn't
white
like a
lies.
easy conversation.
Yes, and like to the point where like because I say this to people in my family now, where I'm like,
Mm,
you can just say no. You don't have to have a why. Like there's a novel idea, you know.
mm.
I'm just saying like I'm not going to be
I
able
mean,
to
that
I'm
is
not going to be
certainly
able
something we haven't been taught.
yeah, I'm not going to be able to make it to like your birthday on Saturday. I'm so sorry. Like you don't actually have to say why.
Right,
And that was
right.
like a fucking like revolution for me. I was like, "Wait, what?
Totally,
You can literally just like
totally.
say the thing and not have to come up with some like bullshit reason and like navigate their emotions and like say it in just the right way so that their feelings aren't hurt. Or you could also just like deal with the fact
Mhm.
that their feelings are going to be hurt and say, I understand why this might hurt your feelings and I'm
That's
really sorry.
disappointing. Yeah.
And I get it. Like, I totally understand why it's disappointing. And I want to do what we can to like get to the other side of that. Like let me know if I can be there in some other way that like actually works for me. I mean, it's just like none of these were
Mm,
options until like the
no.
last few
Listen, and when I'm
years.
like thinking, I'm kind of like thinking back on my life and when I've done similar things. And I
Mhm.
really think that the times that I've hurt people's feelings are the times I've been trying to like emotionally manage the situation and not being actually direct or honest. I think those were the times that I ultimately ended up kind of like hurting people's feelings. And the times I've been really transparent
Mhm.
have been, I don't think I've ever had a circumstance in which I've been transparent about a no that
Mhm.
hasn't been like, oh, okay, I see you, because it's like I'm coming across really like vulnerable and honest. I have like a small example a bit ago. I was had plans to hang out with a friend, and when like the time was coming around, I just like wasn't feeling good. Like my body didn't feel good. I felt kind of like weird and nauseous, and I just like wasn't feeling up for hanging out. And I remember texting them, and they were like, I just was like, hey, I like my belly hurts. And I feel
Yeah.
like really weird. And I think I would so much rather hang out when I'm feeling like good in my body so I could be really present. And then when we ended up hanging out like down the road, I remember they brought it up and they were like, I didn't know you could just do that. Like, I didn't know that you could just be like,
Yeah.
hey, my stomach hurts and I can't hang out. And that be like fucking okay.
20-year-old me very well could have been like, "Oh, my car broke down." Like
Right.
it was so crazy. And like also it's been fun to like point this out because it's a little bit of a thing that I like, you know, to my siblings. And one of
Mm,
the, and I will say that like initially switching to this was actually like kind of painful because it was like a whole new vulnerability. And I remember one situation in particular, like kind of explaining it to one of my sisters, where I was like, I'm going to practice just like being more straightforward. And sometimes the reason I'm not going to want to do something is because I just don't want to. And that doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that
Mm.
it's like not the best place for me. And me and my sisters have had conversations about that. And like even noticing, like I'm noticing that like my gut reaction here is to now try and guilt you into coming, like, oh, but we're gonna have so much fun and it's gonna
Mhm.
be, and I'm practicing like not guilting you into changing your mind. And you just like, I don't know. I've gotten to a place where like if you pressure me into like hanging out or doing something, I have a very like ugh, like over
Yeah.
because I don't experience that very much anymore. Whereas that used to be like the norm. Like that's how you like
Mm.
invited people to like hang out when I was like younger. You know, you're like a teenager, you're not
Wow.
thinking about
Yeah.
shit like that. You're like,
Yeah.
you're like, come on, oh come on, oh you're being a
Yeah.
baby, or blah blah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you're
Yeah.
real young. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like the adult version of that. I've just kind of like stopped engaging with, and I'm like, I'm not gonna like feel guilty for doing what's like best for me. Because at the end of the day, like in the longevity of your friendship, like that's what you want. You want people to show up when they're like feeling good and not feeling forced or
Mhm.
guilted into doing something. Like
Mhm.
when you really like call it out for what it is,
That's the thing.
no one
Yeah.
really wants that
Right.
for the most part. I'm sure there's exceptions, but like,
Sure. But like in the
yeah.
relationships where you really believe people like care about your well-being and like want you to be like want good things for you, like the last thing I would want is for somebody to feel obligated to like show up when it like wasn't the best thing for them and it wasn't good for them, you know. And
Hmm.
I've experienced, I mean, I've
Yeah.
experienced being on the receiving end of people canceling things, and I've experienced like being really
Hmm.
disappointed and even having my feelings hurt, but
Disappointed. Yeah.
at the end of the day being like, I trust you that you're taking care of you. And if this was part of it, then I'm like so supportive of that, you know, and I want to be with you and hang out with
Right.
you, and I can't wait to do that, and I'm really excited to do that when it's feeling really good for you, you know. But
Yes.
yeah, like what if we like all
And that's an
operated
important
that way?
part.
Like if we could trust each other to do that and then felt free to do that, you know, and like really move through the world that way.
Totally. And one of the things is like I kind of said it before, but I'm going to reiterate it again because I think it's important. Is now when I see other people doing that to me and I'm picking up on it, it's just so helpful to be like, "Hey, I just want you to know that if I'm ever feeling like I don't want to do this thing, I'll let you know. Like you don't need to like
Yeah.
manage. I'll speak up for myself." Because
Hmm.
saying that to some of my friends has also been so helpful because they're like, "Okay, thanks for like explicitly like calling that out." Because then they're not like, "Are you sure? Do you sure you want to do that? What if, well, we don't have to. It's okay. We can always reschedule." Because I also have been on the receiving end of that, right? And so
Hmm.
it's just about, I mean, being more direct is just best.
Yeah, being
And I actually, it's funny
transparent,
because
like
I like consider myself so much more direct, but Ben is so direct
yeah.
that he's even like he's even he'll point out to me places where I'm like, "Ooh, I'm being direct," and he's like, "There's room for improvement."
That's so funny. When we were
Yeah, go ahead. I know what you. I feel
oh,
like I know what you.
I was just saying when we were when we were hanging when we were hanging out, you said something. It was just something silly, and Ben from the other room, he was just like, "Nope." He just said
No,
no, and you were like,
no goes.
"What did he
Yeah,
say?"
yeah. Go. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
He said no.
no, and you were like, you were just like having a reaction to the directness. I was like, Ben, if you just add a PE at the end of that and said nope, that might be like just soften it on the edges a little bit.
I mean, like he's so direct. He's the opposite end of the spectrum that
Hmm.
sometimes I'm like, okay, you can soften that just a touch.
Yeah, 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 totally.
But I would say overall, I'm like definitely trying to move towards being more direct like him, and less like, because he just doesn't. He never, ever, ever like feels the need to give an explanation. Feels the need to
Mhm.
like. pre-qualify it, feels the need to like tiptoe. You know, he's like, he sometimes like is so like honest and direct that I'm like, ooh, that was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot.
Honestly
But
though,
he's like not
I
unkind. He's
right.
just so direct.
I wonder though, because I feel like if you could trust somebody to communicate whatever they need to you to like really truly care for themselves in the relationship, and you don't have to do mind reading, you don't have to check in on them like all the time to like worried that you're like going
Yes.
too far, stepping in the wrong way, wouldn't there would be a sense of safety. Like I think it's about like
Yes.
that would be a sense of safety in a relationship. Like I feel that with you. I feel like if there was a thing you that I needed to know, you'd let me
You're gonna
know.
say something.
And I don't feel like I have to like
Yeah.
spin my mind like worrying about stuff because I feel really safe in my relationship with you. And that feels so good, you know? And it's like,
It's so
how can we
true.
cultivate safety in our relationships by being, I think, vulnerable and
And trust.
straightforward and
Yeah.
honest? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And reassure I think that's something that's like nice, is like reassuring the other person, like I will say something if I feel like I need to. Because when you
Mm.
know somebody's going to do that, but then you have to do it, right?
Right.
Because I know that that's a practice. That's a practice with me and Ben, even where it's like, you know, we have the agreement to say something, but we still sometimes forget or get, or it feels too vulnerable and scary to say the thing. So it's like, it's just kind of constant like course correction and getting back to a place where you're doing
Yeah.
it. Like it doesn't always happen, but it's
Yeah.
such a game changer when you move in that direction. And I also just want to say that like you can move in that direction with like existing friendships and family
Yeah.
members. I mean, it's going to feel weird because you're breaking a pattern, but I don't know. My experience is it's always been for the best. And I
Mm.
also have found that most people want to move that way too. There's like a collective conversation going on where people are like
Yeah.
wanting to be more open, you
Mm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
I
I
don't know.
love
It just
that.
feels good not to be micromanaging things, especially when I look back at my young 20-year-old self. Like, what was I doing? I was just kind of like,
Yeah. Just spinning wheels. It's like
just
such an
trying to
exhausting.
micromanage things because I
Yeah.
thought I just thought that everybody was like on the verge of having a breakdown and I was the one who needed to like take care of everything. And it was very weird. It's very weird.
Right. Right.
Codependency leans a
Mm.
little into the codependency world.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm. Mm.
yeah, it's so funny the beliefs that we have that keep us small in our relationships. There's so many, and I feel like we're going to keep uncovering them. That's one of the things I love about this whole process.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, and it's like all the more reason. This is why this like whole topic of conversation. Somebody just recently asked me like, what what topic could I just like talk about forever? And I'm like, well, funny enough, I have a podcast on it, you
Mm.
know, like because this topic of like understanding, uncovering belief systems, you know, and ways of thinking and origins of belief systems and how they play out in our reality, like the it affects our relationships, like, and it's not like it's not isolated just into my own self, my own experience of the world. It bleeds out and it has this like ripple effect, obviously, but like when it's like I think it's sometimes like having that perspective around like the friendships you want, the relationships you want, you wish that you could be seen in certain ways. It starts with you like acknowledging
It
within
does.
yourself. Like it started with me acknowledging like I deserve to be seen in my mess and still loved. Like I deserve, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm worthy of still being loved even though I'm a messy, and that's rooted back into like all of my like original pain, you know, and original fear, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
and and addressing that within myself via our relationship has been has healed, like has been such an incredible like healing journey for me. And I think it's like so I think sometimes even the ruptures that like this is the whole like mirroring thing that we've talked about, but like the areas that you feel like things are off in your relationships, a lot of times those are mirroring something that's off with like your relationship with yourself, like some area that is disconnected, some area
Mm.
you're feeling unworthy, undeserving, or you have some deep judgment over, or something like that. And so our relationships can be an incredible, give us incredible insight into healing that needs to be done, almost like
Totally.
a map to where you can integrate more and where you can be more realized.
And sometimes it's as simple as just seeing things being done differently. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like sometimes it's not even like for me, I feel like so much of that was just that that's like kind of what was modeled and I just needed to like see another way. Like I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
you can do it this way."
Oh, that feels better.
That's an
Yeah.
option.
Yeah.
Didn't yeah, like just did not know, you know?
Mm.
And that's always funny because then it's like becomes like no need to like beat yourself up for going one direction for a while when you just like literally didn't have a map that was like, no, this is actually an option over here. You can do this.
Mm.
Because I feel like
Yeah.
so much of like the things that I kind of am like disappointed in, I have to remind myself. It's like I literally didn't know there were other options. And
Yes.
that it can be like just as simple as you just didn't know that there was an alternative way and you had no awareness that this was like why you were doing the thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
Because I joke, Ben and I constantly joke about how like that is true for us and how we've each taught each other things that is correct. Like a very simple funny one is I'm like, Ben got me to start showering before bed, where I used to shower in the morning. Because he was like, no, you get in the bed and it's like clean. The sheets are clean. Your body's clean. And me and my little sister were joking about it. I was like, I've been doing that wrong my whole life and I didn't know until I met Ben. And that's like the funny, like simple version of that, right? Like, I just was like, I was doing it all wrong. I just didn't know when to shower during the day until I
Mm-hmm.
met Ben. And it's like there's like the funny things like that, and then there's like the emotional things that we've like taught each other. And
Yeah.
same goes for like what you've taught me too. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
just I don't know because I hope it can be a way that for me that relieves a lot of the pain I feel sometimes when I look back on my life and I'm like, man, I wish I knew that earlier,
Yeah.
or I wish I
Yeah.
like I wish
Yeah.
I don't know, or what, how the fuck could I have not seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're such an idiot. Like, I have a tendency to do that. Like, why'd you do that for so long?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
It's
usually, I just like literally didn't know there was another way.
yeah, this is such a good reminder to just have so much compassion for yourself, to have so much compassion for like past versions of yourself, and to again, like take responsibility for the things that you're responsible for, but then like honor your growth, honor like how you've evolved, like,
Mm-hmm.
and grown. And I love that. I'm glad you like pointed that out, because that
Mm-hmm.
does bring like a sense of, yeah, self-compassion. You'll get a lot more growing done with that than with shame.
Yes.
For sure.
Fuck shame.
Fuck shame.
Fuck
Ooh,
guilt and
is that a
shame.
new
Can
t-shirt?
that be our next affirming apparel?
Yes.
Fuck guilt and shame.
Fuck shame. I love that.
They're the
um,
worst. I hate
yeah,
them. But I love you.
I love you. I love talking to you.
I know.
Hmm.
I feel like there could be so many beliefs that keep us small. It's just like figuring those out, and as we go through this life are some of the biggest changes have come from that. So I'm really glad we're talking about it.
Me too. Well,
Well, until next time.
until next time.